A blind date, a little girl, lost and curious, a single sentence that would change everything. The restaurant buzzed with late afternoon chatter. Glasses clinked, waiters rushed between tables, and laughter blended with the soft notes of a piano. In a corner booth sat Henry, a well-dressed man in a dark suit, his eyes tired. He glanced at his watch for the 5th time in under 10 minutes. He hated waiting, especially for a date he hadn't even wanted. A friend had insisted, "Come on, Henry, she's different, I swear." But nothing felt different so far. Just another fancy, hollow dinner. As he considered leaving, something caught his eye. A girl, maybe 6 years old, wearing a flowery dress and a slightly messy braid, stopped right in front of his table. She studied him for a few seconds, then smiled innocently and said, "Mom said she's sorry for being late." Henry blinked, startled. "What? Mom said she's sorry." "She'll be here soon," the girl repeated, resting her small hands on the table. People nearby turned to look. A grown man, alone, approached by a random kid. It looked odd. Trying to stay calm, Henry asked, "And who's your mom?" The girl glanced at the menu like she'd seen it before. "She said you look as handsome as in the picture." "Picture?" He frowned. His friend had told him it was a blind date. No photos exchanged. A waiter brought water, intrigued by the scene. Henry waved him off, keeping his eyes on the girl. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked with a half-smile. "Clara," she replied softly. "And yours, mister?" "Henry." She nodded, as if confirming something. "Mom said she'd be happy to see you up close. Said your cologne still smells the same." For a moment, Henry forgot to breathe. The same scent. No one had said that in years, except one person. He leaned forward. "Clara, what's your mom's name?" The girl looked to the side and put a finger to her lips. "Can't tell. Mom said it's a surprise." Henry's pulse quickened. Confusion took over. This dinner was supposed to help him move on, and suddenly a child spoke as if she knew a version of him long gone. Clara climbed onto the chair beside him and started drawing with colored pencils on a napkin. He watched her, trying to piece it together. In the drawing, she sketched a man, a woman, and a child holding hands. "That your family?" he asked, puzzled. "It's ours," she answered simply. Henry froze. The girl kept coloring, unaware of how her words cut through him. The piano in the background grew louder. The room faded. All he could hear was his own shaky breath. "Ours?" The word echoed in his mind. A waiter offered wine, and Henry nodded, hoping it would steady him. But with each passing minute, the girl said something that hit deeper. "Mom will be happy to see you smile. Mom said you love cheese soufflé. Mom cried when she found your letter." "Letter?" He straightened, unsettled. That phrase, it couldn't be. He stared at her. "Clara, have you seen me before?" She shrugged. "Just in Mom's photo." Time seemed to stop. A flood of memories rushed in. A woman, a gentle perfume, a goodbye with no explanation. Could it be? No. Impossible. Henry lifted his gaze to the mirror behind the table. A woman stood at the restaurant's entrance, tall, hair loose, eyes wet. She looked at him with a mix of guilt and tenderness. The little girl jumped off the chair and ran to her. "Mom!" Henry's chest tightened. The world went silent. The woman walked toward him slowly, carrying the weight of years on her shoulders. Their eyes met, and the past hit like a storm. Henry stayed frozen, staring at the doorway, as the old wound inside him began to throb again, one that had never really healed. On the outside, he was the man everyone envied, a successful businessman, owner of a growing consultancy, always featured at events and magazines, giving interviews on how to reach the top. But inside, he felt like someone who'd never arrived anywhere. At 38, he had everything they said mattered. Money, status, an imported car, a high-rise apartment with a city view. Yet every night, when he took off the watch, the tie, and the practiced smile, all that remained was heavy silence, and a memory that never left, a memory that smelled of sweet perfume, that laughed softly over the phone, that carried a name he avoided saying out loud, afraid it might summon her back and destroy the walls he'd spent years building. He had always been disciplined, raised by a strict father and an elegant mother who taught him to look perfect in public. The boy who got top grades, the teen who caused no trouble, the adult who became the family's pride. But no one ever asked what he wanted. He learned early to follow the script written for him: a prestigious college, a stable career, a suitable marriage within the same social circle. Only life didn't stick to the plan. The first blow came when he was still in his early 20s. He had fallen deeply in love with someone far outside his world, a simple woman with an easy laugh and eyes that met his without fear. She was the opposite of everything his family expected, but she was exactly what his heart had chosen. She was the one he dreamed of building a family with, the one he imagined breaking the script of a perfect life for, trading fancy dinners for nights, eating pizza on the couch and laughing about nothing, until the day she simply disappeared. No goodbye, no explanation, no fight the night before, no clear reason. Henry spent days calling, sending messages, begging for answers. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. Profiles deleted, number no longer valid. All that remained was a letter, or rather, the absence of one. He had written one himself. Back then, desperate and afraid of losing the only real thing he'd ever had, he sat at his desk, tearing through 5 drafts before finally managing to pour his heart onto paper. He apologized for anything he might have done without realizing. He begged her to talk to him, even if it was just to end things face to face. He said he was ready to fight against his family, against people's opinions, whatever it took. He sealed the letter in a plain envelope. He remembered his father's voice. "You're throwing away your image over some silly crush." His mother, too, saying, "Think carefully, dear. That's not the right woman for you." Even so, he sent it, dropped it in the mailbox with trembling hands, as if that envelope carried his entire future. No answer ever came. Silence was the only reply. A long, sharp, humiliating silence. Henry tried to move on. He buried himself in work, as if each new deal could erase the sting of being abandoned. He started to accept that maybe she'd just given up on him. Maybe she'd found someone better, someone without a complicated family or a controlling father. He grew colder, told himself love was a waste of time, that emotions made a man weak, that every relationship had an expiration date anyway. At first, his friends thought it was just a phase, but the phase became a lifestyle. He spent more time in airports than at home. Collected hotel check-ins, couldn't remember half the people he dined with. He learned to be charming just enough, polite, but never open. Women came and went, some beautiful, smart, kind, but none made it past the invisible line where he kept the ghost of what love once was. He didn't let them. That's when his friend Talita stepped in, the only person brave enough to tell him the truth straight to his face. "You know you're not fooling anyone, right?" she said one morning, sipping coffee with him on the office balcony. "I fool people just enough to sign contracts," he replied dryly. "Work isn't everything, Henry. You're turning into a well-dressed robot. Robots don't feel pain." He cut her off. "My mistake was believing in feelings." She studied him quietly. "What if I set you up with someone? No pressure, no promises, no love of your life nonsense. Just dinner, some light conversation. I don't need anyone." "It's not about needing, it's about allowing," Talita said. "You're not living, Henry. You're just moving." He ignored her, but the words stayed. Days later, she showed up smiling, phone in hand. "Done. Problem solved. What now? I set you up on a blind date. Before you complain, she doesn't know you're that Henry from magazine covers. She just knows you're a decent guy, I know. I'm not going." "Yes, you are," she shot back. "Because I know you. You'll say no, stay home staring at spreadsheets, then lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why life feels empty." "You're being dramatic. I'm being real. And if you don't like it, you can leave before dessert, but at least you'll have tried." He hesitated, but eventually gave in, if only to prove her wrong. He agreed. Talita gave him just the basics. Simple dinner, nice restaurant, she'll be there at 7. No photos, no social media before, no expectations. Just go. That was the plan. Show up, be polite, chat, thank her, and go home thinking, I tried. I'm done. But it didn't go that way. Now, sitting at that table, with a little girl named Clara sketching our family on a napkin, everything felt like it had spun out of his control. He stirred his glass of wine, but the taste barely registered. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars, lights, people going about their lives. Inside, time shrank, pulling Henry back to the wound he'd spent years numbing. Your perfume still smells the same. She cried when she found your letter. How could that child know about the letter? How could she talk about the perfume like she'd lived through that time herself? Henry tried to think logically. Talita knew parts of his story, but not such private details. And even if she did, why would she involve a child in it? It made no sense. He took a deep breath, looked again at Clara, so calm, as if she belonged there. And then he heard it, a soft, trembling voice behind him, saying his name as though it were unearthing years of silence. Henry. It wasn't just the sound that hit him. It all hit at once. Her tone, the pause, the way she took a breath before finishing his name. He turned slowly, afraid of what he might see. And there she was. The woman who vanished. The woman he loved. The woman whose eyes now carried the weight of a secret he didn't yet understand. In that moment, the blind date stopped being a simple dinner. It became a reckoning, a confrontation with the past, a chance to finally hear the answer that had been missing from that letter all those years ago. Without realizing, Henry gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. Because deep down he already knew, after that night, nothing in his life would ever be the same. He stood frozen for a few seconds. His heart raced, almost trying to escape his chest. The woman in front of him took a deep breath, trying to gather the courage to step closer. Her eyes, the same ones he had dreamed about countless times, now carried both guilt and longing. Clara ran up to her mother, hugging her legs with excitement. "Mom, he was keeping me company." "He's nice, just like you said." Henry stayed still, his gaze fixed. The girl's words echoed in his head, tangled with memories he thought he'd buried forever. "Hi, Henry," she said, her voice trembling. "Mariana," was all he managed to whisper. The name left his lips softly, but it carried restrained anger and emotion. She smiled awkwardly. "I figured it would feel strange, seeing you again after all this time." Henry leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, his tone sharp and cold. "Strange isn't the word. Unbelievable, maybe, especially after you disappeared without a word." Mariana lowered her gaze. "I know. You have every right to be angry." "Angry?" He let out a dry laugh. "I spent months thinking you were dead, then years wondering what I did wrong." Clara looked between them, confused. "Mom, do you know him from before?" Henry swallowed hard. Mariana took a breath and answered gently, "Yes, sweetheart. We met a long time ago." He studied her closely. The gestures were the same. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the look she gave when she tried to hide guilt. Nothing had changed, except now she had a daughter, and he had never known. A waiter approached, but Henry waved him away. Mariana sat down carefully, still holding the girl's hand. "Clara, honey, why don't you go pick a dessert?" she said softly. "Henry and I need to talk for a bit." The little girl nodded cheerfully and began flipping through the menu. As she walked away, the air grew heavy. Silence, shallow breaths, a knot between them neither could untie. "So this is how you show up again?" he asked. "With a 6-year-old who tells me I look like the man in her mum's photo?" Mariana hesitated. "Henry, I needed to see you. I didn't know if I'd have the courage to text or call. I just thought this would be easier." "Easier?" he scoffed. "You send your daughter to talk to me in a restaurant and call that easier?" She closed her eyes for a moment. "I know it sounds insane, but she insisted on coming, and I couldn't say no." Henry shook his head in disbelief. "Seems like you never could say the truth either." She took a long breath. "The truth is, I was a coward. That much I figured." He shot back coldly. What I don't know is why." She went quiet. Her fingers nervously toyed with the thin ring on her right hand. "I was pregnant, Henry." The air vanished. "What?" She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "I found out 2 weeks after that argument we had, and I panicked. I was terrified." "Afraid of what?" "Of everything. Of you hating me, of your family humiliating me, of becoming some scandal." Henry laughed bitterly. "So your solution was to vanish, to pretend neither I nor your daughter existed?" Mariana lowered her head. "I tried to reach out later, but your father—" Her voice faltered. "He came to where I was living. He said you were engaged to someone else, that I was ruining your career, your reputation, and that if I had any dignity, I'd disappear." Henry went pale. "My father said that. He claimed he was protecting you, said you didn't want to see me anymore." The ground seemed to crumble beneath him. The man who had raised him, who always preached, "Family comes first," had been the one to destroy his own. Henry covered his face with both hands. "And you believed him?" "I didn't know what to believe. I called, but your number didn't exist anymore. I sent letters, but they all came back." He looked up sharply. "Letters? What letters?" "2. One with the ultrasound and one with a note." "I never got them." Mariana inhaled deeply, trying not to break down. "I thought you'd forgotten me. So I went on alone." Henry fell silent, staring at the little girl at the end of the table, swinging her legs and smiling as the waiter brought her a colorful sundae. His daughter. The daughter who had grown up never knowing her father. The weight of it hit him like a storm. The cold, composed man was gone, replaced by someone lost, shattered, trying to piece together the life that had been stolen from him. Mariana wiped a tear. "I didn't come here to blame you, Henry, or to ask for anything. I just thought you deserved to know." "And what did you expect me to say?" he asked. Not harshly, just lost. "Nothing," she whispered. "I just needed to get it off my chest." Henry kept staring at Clara, trying to make sense of it all. The little girl looked back and smiled, innocent. "Mum, can he come with us later?" The question hit him like an arrow. He didn't know what to say. Neither did Mariana. Clara swirled her straw inside the glass and giggled at her melting ice cream. Henry swallowed hard. He looked back at Mariana and said quietly, "I missed 6 years of her life, and you think that's something you can just get off your chest?" Mariana let out a sob. "I know it's not, but maybe it's not too late to start over." Henry didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl, and something inside him began to shift. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was something deeper, something he didn't know how to name, and in that heavy silence he realized the pain of losing someone is deep, but discovering what you've lost without knowing it is unbearable. The waiter brought the bill, but no one looked at it. Mariana watched her daughter eat while Henry stared at the past sitting across from him, now with eyes, a voice, and the smile of a child. Night stretched outside, and the restaurant was slowly emptying, but for them, time had stopped. And the story that began with a simple "Mum said she's sorry for being late" was only starting to reveal the real reason for that reunion. The restaurant no longer felt the same. The sound of the piano now seemed distant, muffled by the tension that hung in the air. Mariana still held the crumpled napkin, her red eyes searching for words that wouldn't hurt anymore. Henry, silent, stirred his glass of wine without drinking. It was the only thing he could do without falling apart. Inside, he was at war. Every good memory fought against the anger of what he had lost. Every smile they once shared clashed with the image of the girl who'd grown up not knowing who he was. "If my father hadn't interfered, would you have stayed?" he asked, his voice rough. Mariana exhaled slowly, her gaze lowered. "I wanted to stay, Henry, but he was cruel. He said horrible things, told me you blamed me for everything, that you didn't want to see me again. I was fragile, scared, alone. And I believed him." Henry placed his hands on the table. "He always had to control everything, even what I felt." "I didn't know that," she murmured. "I only saw the version he wanted me to see." For a few seconds, silence took over again. The only sound was the clinking of spoons from other tables. Clara, distracted, drew little hearts on a napkin. Henry watched his daughter, and his chest tightened once more. The resemblance was undeniable. The shape of her eyes, the way she held the pencil, the small crease between her brows when she focused. It was like looking into a tiny mirror. His tone softened, though his intensity didn't. "Why didn't you try to find me again?" "I did," she said. "But every time I got close, someone reminded me that you had moved on." "I moved on because I had no choice," he replied, his voice breaking. "But not with someone else. I moved on with loneliness." Mariana lifted her eyes, moved. "I thought seeing you again would be easier," she said with a faint, bitter smile. "But standing here now, I realize nothing ever really went away." Henry looked away. "I wish I could say it did for me, but I'd be lying." She took a deep breath, trying to keep her tears from falling. "I came here to tell you everything, and to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't erase 6 years, Mariana. I know. But it's the only way to start." Clara came back, holding the drawing she'd made. "Look, mister, it's us, the 3 of us at the park. Mom said I never had a daddy to play with, but now I can, right?" Henry froze. The innocence in her voice cut through him like an invisible blade. Mariana gently pulled her onto her lap, trying to soften the moment. But Clara insisted, smiling. "Will you be my daddy?" Time stopped again. Tears filled Henry's eyes before he even noticed. He couldn't speak. His voice simply wouldn't come out. "Sweetheart," Mariana began, trying to ease things, but Henry raised a hand, breathing deeply. I don't know if I deserve that." The little girl frowned. "Deserve what?" "To meet you only now," he answered softly, his voice trembling. "To have lost so much time." Clara smiled, pure and warm. "Mom says sometimes we lose things so we can learn how to find them again." The line broke him. Henry looked at Mariana, and she nodded, her eyes full of tears. Pain, regret, tenderness. It all blended together there, at that restaurant table where the past and present finally faced each other. Mariana reached across and took his hand. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Henry. I just want you to know Clara. She deserves that." Henry didn't pull away. For the first time in years there was no coldness in his gaze. "And you?" "Me?" she asked, surprised. You deserve forgiveness too." She smiled faintly, relief and sadness mixing in her face. "You're still the same, you know," she said softly. "Only now, you seem more human." Henry let out a small, quiet laugh. "I think that's your daughter's fault." Clara beamed, not fully grasping the weight of the moment. "Can I order dessert for you too?" she asked. "Mum says the pudding here is the best in the world." Henry stood up slowly and reached out his hand to the little girl. "Let's go pick it together then." She took his hand naturally, as if it was something she'd done 100 times before, and in that small, innocent gesture, something inside Henry cracked. The wall he had built for years began to crumble. As they walked toward the counter, Mariana watched, the man she once loved, now beside the daughter he never knew existed. It was a simple scene, but it carried more meaning than words could hold. She wiped her tears quietly, hiding behind a napkin. Henry came back a few minutes later with 2 cups of pudding and a different expression on his face. He wasn't the cold businessman anymore. He was a man trying to reconnect with the life he'd lost. "She takes after you," he said, serving the dessert to the girl. Mariana smiled softly. "And she's got your temper." Henry chuckled, watching Clara with caramel sauce all over her face. "That's a dangerous mix." The girl laughed out loud, and for a moment the 3 of them laughed together, a light, innocent sound that broke the heaviness of the past. But soon silence returned. Mariana gathered her courage and asked, "Henry, what are you going to do now?" He thought for a moment, his eyes on the small hands holding the spoon. "I don't know, but I know what I don't want to do. Waste any more time." Her tears came again, this time from relief. "So, can I call you tomorrow?" she asked hopefully. Henry nodded. "You can, and you can also let me drive you home tonight." Mariana hesitated, surprised. "Are you sure?" "I am." I've already missed enough years without you two. I'm not missing another night." She smiled. Henry stood, paid the bill, and waited as they gathered their things. As they walked out, Clara held one of his hands and one of her mother's, a simple gesture, full of meaning. Outside, the night air was cool. City lights reflected off car windows, and the faint sound of a saxophone echoed down the street. Henry opened the car door and looked at them. "Shall we?" he asked. Mariana nodded. "Let's go." At that moment, Henry realized that maybe fate had taken its time, but it was still willing to offer a second chance. And as the car drove away, Clara hummed softly in the back seat, unaware that this was the first night of a new life, not just for her, but for the man who had just rediscovered love in its purest form. The drive to Mariana's building was quiet. Clara had fallen asleep in the back, her head against the window, clutching her small pink teddy bear. Henry kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wandered, lost in a flood of memories. Every red light, every turn seemed to bring back pieces of what he had forgotten or tried to forget. Mariana watched his reflection in the glass. He was the same man as before, but there was a new kind of tiredness in his eyes. A weariness she knew well, the kind that comes from spending too long trying to fix things that can't be undone. When the car stopped in front of her building, Henry took a deep breath. "Can I come up?" he asked quietly. "Of course," she said, unsure. "Clara will be happy to see you still here when she wakes up." The elevator moved slowly, filled with awkward silence. On the 7th floor, Mariana unlocked the door. The apartment was simple, but full of warmth. Books piled on the shelves, drawings taped to the walls, toys scattered across the couch. It was a home, the kind that could have been his too. Henry looked around, his hand brushing over a framed photo on the shelf. In it, Clara smiled wide, dressed as a fairy. Behind her, Mariana, the same gentle smile but with a calmer light in her eyes. "She looks happy," he said softly. "She is," Mariana replied. "But she always asked why she didn't have a dad. I used to make up stories. I'd tell her he was traveling a lot, helping people somewhere far away." Henry turned away. "And she believed that?" "Kids believe anything, Henry, especially when their heart wants to." He sat down on the couch, elbows on his knees. "I don't know what to say. I don't know if I should be angry, cry, or thank the universe that we're still here to face this." Mariana sat beside him carefully. "I don't know either. I just know I've carried this weight for 6 years. He turned to her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I thought telling you would ruin your life." "Ruin my life?" he said, stunned. "Mariana, you were my life." Her tears fell again. "I thought I was protecting you. But I only hurt you." Henry rubbed his face, exhausted. "I needed to know, even if it broke me." "I know, but I was alone too. Pregnant, scared, with a family that turned their backs on me." The silence returned, but this time it wasn't hostile. It was full of shared pain. From the bedroom came the faint sound of Clara moving. Mariana stood, went to tuck her in, and pulled the blanket over her. Henry watched from the doorway. That simple, ordinary moment shattered his heart, and somehow mended it at the same time. When she returned, he was standing by a child's painting on the wall. "She made this?" he asked. "Yes, for her 5th birthday. It looks just like the drawing from the restaurant," he said with a tender smile. "She's got talent." Mariana nodded. "She draws everything she feels. Sometimes when I'm sad, she draws me smiling. She says it makes the day a little lighter." Henry let out a quiet, emotional laugh. "And does it work?" "It does," she said, smiling through tears. For a few seconds, they just looked at each other. There was so much they wanted to say, yet no words seemed big enough, until Mariana broke the silence. "Would you have accepted her? Back then?" "How could I not?" he replied firmly. "I would have stayed. I would have faced the whole world." She took a deep breath, feeling the full weight of regret. "I should have believed in you." Henry took a step closer. "And I should have looked for you, even when they told me you'd left because you wanted to." They stood face to face. No shouting, no accusations, just two people trying to forgive themselves for a past they didn't know how to handle. "What happens to us now?" she asked softly. Henry looked toward the bedroom, where Clara slept peacefully. "I think now it's about her." Mariana nodded. "Yes, she deserves to have a father. And you deserve not to carry this alone." Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were lighter, freeing. Henry reached out and, without thinking too much, pulled her into his arms. At first it felt awkward, the weight of history, the years apart, the pain still fresh. But then the hug settled in, natural, needed. "I don't hate you, Mariana," he whispered. "I only hated the silence." So did I. When they pulled apart, there was something new in both their eyes. It wasn't the same love as before. It was deeper, steadier. It was the understanding that even broken things can be rebuilt. The clock showed nearly midnight. Henry stood up, ready to leave. "I'll be back in the morning," he said with conviction. "I want to make breakfast with you too." Mariana smiled. She'll love that." "And you?" "Me too." He walked to the door, glanced once more toward the bedroom, and said before leaving, "You know what's crazy? I spent years trying to forget the past, and now all I want is to live in it again." Mariana stood still, watching him go, her heart racing. When the door closed, she leaned against the wall and smiled through her tears. Maybe fate really did have its own plans after all. Outside, Henry walked down the stairs in silence. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the usual emptiness. He felt fear, yes, but also hope. And deep down, a new certainty. No matter what had happened before, he would do everything differently now. The next morning, Henry arrived at Mariana's building before the sun had fully risen. He carried a paper bag filled with warm bread, fruit, and a heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. He hadn't slept much. His mind spun with memories, promises, and questions. He didn't know exactly how to act. It felt strange knocking on the door of a home where lived a little girl he'd known for less than 24 hours. Yet somehow, it already felt like she'd been part of him forever. Mariana opened the door in her pajamas, surprised. "You came early." "I promised breakfast," he said, holding up the bag, "and I keep my promises." She smiled sleepily and let him in. Clara came running, hair messy, and threw herself into his arms as if they'd been friends forever. "You came back! I told Mom you would!" Henry hugged her tightly, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "And I told you I wasn't going to waste any more time, remember?" While the girl busied herself making chocolate milk, Henry and Mariana set the table. The silence between them now felt different, softer, lighter, filled with things they didn't need to say. Henry broke it first. "I thought a lot last night." "About what?" "About us. About everything that happened. About what people told me. And everything they didn't." Mariana bit her lip. "I figured you would." He studied her for a moment. "Mariana, I need to ask you something. Do you still have anything from those days?" She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Letters, notes, anything." Mariana hesitated. Then she took a breath, stood up, and went to the bedroom. He heard the sound of a drawer opening, papers being shuffled. She returned holding a small wooden box, worn at the edges, tied with a faded ribbon. "I kept everything," she said, setting it on the table, "even when it hurt to look at." Henry opened it carefully. Inside were fragments of a love interrupted, movie tickets, a photo of them smiling under the rain, a broken necklace, and one yellowed envelope. He recognized it instantly. My God! In the corner of the envelope, his own handwriting. "For Mariana, with everything I still can't say out loud." His hands trembled as he picked it up. "You got the letter?" "I did, but not from the mail," she said quietly. "Your father delivered it himself." Henry's eyes widened. "What?" "He came to my house, said he was doing it for you. Told me to read it and then forget it. Said you'd written it as a polite goodbye." Henry's blood ran cold. "He lied," he whispered. "That letter was never a goodbye." With shaking hands, he unfolded the paper and began to read in silence. Each line was like a blade. Every word was filled with love, fear, and hope. "I want you by my side, even if the world says no. If I have to lose everything, then let it be with you." Henry pressed the paper against his chest. He destroyed everything. Mariana cried softly. I read it thinking it was a goodbye, that you were being kind while letting me go. I cried the whole night. Henry ran a hand over his face, furious and heartbroken at once. He never told me. He just said you'd moved on, that you didn't want to talk to me anymore, and I believed him. Mariana looked at him with deep sadness. And that's how two hearts stayed silent for 6 years. Henry took a long breath, fighting the anger inside him. I needed to know this. I deserved to know. At that moment, Clara walked into the room holding her teddy bear. Mommy, are you okay? Mariana forced a smile, wiping her tears. I'm fine, sweetheart. Mommy just remembered something sad. Henry crouched to meet the little girl's eyes. Sometimes we cry even for the good things, you know. Clara thought for a second and replied, Then you're remembering something good, right? They both laughed through their tears. Henry hugged her and looked at Mariana over the girl's shoulder, a look full of forgiveness. A look that said, The lies are over, now only the truth remains. After Clara went back to her room to play, Mariana stepped closer. Henry, I didn't bring you back to relive the past. I just wanted you to meet Clara. And I did, he said firmly. And now that I have, I'm not going anywhere. Mariana stayed quiet. Henry continued. What your father took from me, I'm going to get back. Every moment, every memory, every hug we lost. She wiped her face. You talk as if there's still time. There's always time when you really want it, he said, glancing toward the room where his daughter played. And this time, I do. Mariana looked at him for a few seconds and smiled tenderly. She's going to love you, Henry. She already does. She just doesn't know how much that's going to change my life. He picked up the envelope again, ran his fingers over her name and said, This letter was never a goodbye. And I promise that now our story will finally get the ending it deserves. From the bedroom came the excited voice of the little girl. Daddy Henry, come see my new drawing. Henry looked at Mariana, surprised. She laughed, still teary-eyed. Looks like she just decided what to call you. He smiled, deeply moved, and walked to the room. There, Clara proudly held up a new drawing. 3 figures, holding hands under a huge sun, with a red heart filling the sky. At the bottom, written in shaky letters, were the words, My family. Henry knelt down, hugged his daughter, and closed his eyes. In that moment, everything made sense. The past couldn't be changed, but the future could, and he would do everything in his power to make sure this story finally found peace. In the days that followed, something began to shift. Henry, once buried in spreadsheets, meetings, and endless deadlines, started finding space for what truly mattered. Now, every morning, his first priority was breakfast with Clara and Mariana. At first, it felt strange. He still felt like a visitor in their lives, someone who had arrived too late, trying to find his place. But Clara, with the ease only a child has, didn't let that distance last long. On the first Monday, as Henry rushed through his coffee, she appeared with her backpack and the widest smile in the world. You're taking me to school today, right? He blinked, surprised. Me? Of course. You're my daddy now. Mum said you can. Mariana chuckled from the kitchen doorway. If you want, you can go. She won't accept anyone else after this. Henry looked down at the little girl, who was already holding his hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. All right then, shall we? During the ride, Clara talked non-stop. Stories about school, her friends, how she'd won a prize for drawing the most colorful sky in class. Henry listened and smiled, feeling something bloom in his chest. Maybe love, maybe healing. When they arrived at school, Clara hugged him quickly and said, Bye, Daddy. He froze for a moment, letting that word sink in. Daddy. Short, simple, but powerful enough to erase 6 years of emptiness. It was as if the missing piece of his life had finally found its voice. Later that day at the office, people noticed the difference. Henry smiled more, spoke softer. Even Talita, the friend who'd set up the blind date, caught on. Looks like someone finally melted that ice in your chest, huh? Henry laughed. Let's just say life gave me back what it once took away. And the woman from the dinner. She became everything, he said, staring out the window. She became the reason I want to go home. That evening, he kept his promise. He returned to Mariana's apartment carrying a simple bouquet of flowers and a box of new colored pencils for Clara. When she saw him at the door, she ran up yelling, "You came back, Daddy!" Henry knelt, opened his arms and pulled her into a tight hug. "Of course I came back. I promised, remember?" Mariana watched from a distance, her heart full of joy and disbelief. Seeing Henry there, playing with their daughter on the living room floor, felt like a dream she'd had too many times, one she never thought she'd see again. After Clara fell asleep, the two of them sat together on the balcony. The moonlight touched Mariana's face, and the soft wind played with her hair. Henry leaned against the railing and broke the quiet. "I used to think success was what completed me, that money, travel, and achievements were enough. But I've learned none of that means anything when you're eating dinner alone." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. "I thought I was protecting everyone by running away. In the end, I just hurt the ones I loved most." Henry gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "Maybe we needed to fall to understand what truly matters. And what matters to you now?" "This," he said, nodding toward the apartment where Clara was sleeping. "You too." Mariana took a deep breath, as if his words cleared years of pain from her chest. "You sound so sure." "Because for the first time, I am." A gentle silence filled the space between them. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. It wasn't the impulsive touch of old passion. It was the steady touch of trust being rebuilt. In the days that followed, Henry began showing up more and more. He helped Clara with homework, picked her up from school, made pancakes on weekends. Each small gesture was a way to reclaim lost time. And little by little, Clara started drawing her father into every sketch, always beside her mother, always smiling. At first, Mariana feared getting used to his presence again, but slowly she relaxed. At night they'd share dinner, and conversation flowed easily, just like it once did. Henry spoke about work. She talked about her students at the daycare. Clara interrupted with funny stories. It was simple, but it was perfect. One Sunday, the three went to the park. The sun was bright, and Clara's laughter echoed between the trees. Henry pushed her on the swing while Mariana watched from a bench, tears shining in her eyes. Suddenly, Clara shouted, "Hiya, Daddy! I want to touch the sky!" Henry laughed. "You will, sweetheart, you will." And in that moment he realized it wasn't just his daughter who was flying. He was too. After years trapped in pain, he finally felt free. Free to feel, to forgive, to start over. When they drove back home, Clara fell asleep in the back seat. Henry and Mariana stayed quiet. But when he parked the car, he spoke softly, breaking the stillness. "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For letting me come back. For letting me be part of this, even after everything." She smiled and touched his arm gently. "I couldn't take away Clara's right to know the best side of you." Henry turned his head, meeting her gaze. It was a brief moment, but full of meaning. A look that said everything words couldn't. Later, at the door, Mariana surprised him. "Henry?" "Yeah?" "Clara wants to show you her school play on Friday. You're coming, right?" "I wouldn't miss it for anything." She smiled. And as he walked down the stairs, he felt something inside him shift for good. He was no longer the man who ran from feelings. He was the man who finally understood the value of being present. Henry looked up at the night sky before getting into his car. He remembered his daughter's voice in the park. "I want to touch the sky." He smiled. Maybe she already had, with the love that had brought him back to life. And in that instant he knew, redemption doesn't come when the past is erased. It comes when you choose to write the future with clean hands, an open heart, and the people you love beside you. Friday came faster than Henry expected. All week he lived in a mix of calm and anticipation, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Every morning with Clara felt like a new beginning. Every talk with Mariana like another piece falling back into place. But that evening held something special, the school performance. Clara had practiced for days. Mariana helped sew her blue dress, and Henry built the stage props the teacher had requested. They worked side by side, laughing, exchanging looks that spoke more than words. It was as if destiny, after years of silence, was finally whispering, "Now's the time to fix things." The school auditorium was full. Proud parents held up their phones, teachers straightened chairs, and children ran excitedly backstage. Henry sat in the third row, his heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. When the lights dimmed, Clara appeared on stage, small but shining bright enough to fill the room. She danced, spoke her lines, and at the end looked toward the audience. Her eyes found Henry's, and she shouted without a microphone, with all the love she could fit into her tiny chest. "I love you, Daddy." The audience laughed and applauded. Henry froze, fighting back tears. But they came anyway, heavy, honest. It was the kind of love that doesn't need time to grow. It just needs to be recognized. After the show, Mariana approached quietly, wearing that same shy smile she used to have. "She was beautiful, wasn't she?" "She's perfect," he said, still emotional. "You both are." They walked together to the car, Clara asleep in her mother's arms. On the way, Mariana seemed thoughtful. Henry noticed. What is it?" "There's something I want to show you." "Now?" "Now." She invited him upstairs. After tucking Clara into bed, she returned to the living room. She held the same wooden box as before, but this time there was something new inside. Henry sat down, watching her open it carefully. From it, she took out a white envelope, newer, clean, with his name written by hand. "I wrote this a few months ago," she said, her voice trembling. "I never had the courage to give it to you." Henry frowned slightly. "A letter?" "Yes. Before I found you again, I wrote it to say goodbye for good. I thought I'd never see you again." She handed him the envelope. Henry took a deep breath and began to read silently. "Henry, if this letter reaches you, maybe I've already gone down another road. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that in all these years, there hasn't been a single day when I didn't think of you. I ran away, it's true, but not because I stopped loving you. I ran because I loved you too much, and I thought losing you would hurt less than watching you hate me. Today, when I see our daughter sleeping, I see you in her, and I realize love never left. It was just waiting for the right moment to return. If one day destiny crosses our paths again, I hope it brings you peace. With love, Mariana." When he finished reading, Henry couldn't speak for several seconds. The letter trembled in his hands. He looked at her, eyes full of tears, and whispered, "You have no idea how much this changes everything." Mariana lowered her gaze, afraid of what he might say next. "I almost sent it on Clara's birthday, but I thought it didn't matter anymore." "It does," he said firmly, "because she's what remained of us when everything else was lost. And now she's what brings us back together." Henry stood and walked toward her. Without speaking, he pulled something from his pocket, the old envelope, the one he had written 6 years earlier. "This was my letter to you, and this," he lifted the one he'd just read, "is yours to me." He placed both on the table, side by side. Now they're finally in the same place. Mariana smiled through her tears. "Time was cruel to us. But it was generous too," he replied. "It gave us a second chance." Henry took a step closer and held her hands. "I forgive you, Mariana, for everything." She looked up, surprised. "Even after all this time? Time doesn't erase what's real, and what we had was never a lie." Her tears fell silently. "I forgive you too, Henry, for making me believe you wouldn't love me enough." They hugged, a long, heavy embrace full of tears and release. But this time, it wasn't an embrace of pain, it was peace. From the bedroom, a sleepy voice interrupted the moment. "Mommy, Daddy, are you still awake?" They pulled apart, laughing. "We're coming, sweetheart," Mariana called back. Henry wiped his eyes and looked at her. "Tomorrow's Saturday. How about a little trip?" "Where to?" "Anywhere, as long as we're together." She smiled and nodded, and for the first time in a long while, they both believed the future could truly be beautiful. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. Clara played on the carpet with her father while Mariana made breakfast. Laughter filled the apartment, light, genuine, as if time itself had given them back what it once took away. Henry looked at Mariana and thought quietly. Maybe forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, but choosing to walk through it with love. He stood, went to the kitchen, and hugged her from behind. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me, even when you thought you had. She turned, her eyes shining. And thank you for coming back. Henry looked at them both, mother and daughter, and smiled. Now nothing can pull us apart again. Mariana smiled back, and in that instant pain became redemption, guilt became memory, and loss became love in its purest form. The past had finally been forgiven. Time passed, and slowly everything found its rightful place. Henry was no longer the cold man chasing deals and deadlines. He was the father waiting at the school gate, the man who traded endless meetings for Sunday picnics. What once was absence had become presence. Mariana's apartment, once silent, now overflowed with life, laughter, clattering pans in the kitchen, bedtime stories told in soft voices. Henry discovered that happiness wasn't coming home to luxury. It was coming home to people waiting for you. One night after dinner, Clara asked, "Daddy, can you read me the story of the letter again?" He smiled, sitting beside her bed. Again? You've heard it about 10 times. But I like when you read it. Because it's our story. Henry glanced toward Mariana, who leaned against the doorframe, watching them. He picked up the old yellowed envelope, once a symbol of pain, now one of memory, and began to read aloud. I want you by my side, even if the world says no. If I have to lose everything, then let it be with you. Love isn't what we plan, it's what appears, shatters our certainties, and forces us to start over. And if you are my new beginning, then I accept the end of everything that came before. The little girl listened wide-eyed, even if she didn't understand every word. When he finished, she asked, "Daddy, why do you and Mommy cry when you talk about that letter?" Henry smiled. "Because it's the one that brought us back together. Then it's magic?" "It is," Mariana said, laughing softly. "It's the letter that turned pain into love." Clara nestled between them and soon fell asleep. Henry and Mariana stayed there in silence, watching their daughter, the living proof of everything that survived. Henry broke the silence with a calm voice. "Have you noticed how life went full circle just to bring us back here again?" Mariana nodded. "Maybe it had to be this way. We wouldn't have learned the meaning of forgiveness if we hadn't fallen so deep." "Yeah," he sighed. "Pain taught what time alone never could." She looked into his eyes. "And now, we write the rest of the story." Mariana smiled. "No more disappearances. No more, only presence." Henry pulled her into an embrace and kissed her forehead. Outside, rain began to fall. But for the first time in a long while, it didn't feel sad. It was a rain of renewal, the kind that washes away the weight left behind by the past. The next morning, he woke up before sunrise. He made coffee, cut some fruit, and waited for the two of them to wake. When Clara appeared still sleepy, he lifted her into his arms. "Good morning, sweetheart. Good morning, Daddy. I dreamed about us 3 in a park. And what were we doing in the dream? You and Mommy were getting married." Henry laughed, surprised. Mariana, standing in the doorway, laughed too. "That girl has a dangerous imagination, or maybe a powerful intuition," he replied, with a look full of meaning. Time passed. And a year later, the park from Clara's dream became real. On a sunny Saturday, with a few guests, laughter, and simple flowers, Henry and Mariana sealed what destiny had postponed. Clara walked down the aisle holding a small bouquet and smiling wide. When the officiant asked if he promised to care for his family through all the days yet to come, Henry answered firmly, "I promise, even on the days I make mistakes." Mariana cried, and Clara clapped her hands. It was the ending that time had owed them since the beginning, not a perfect ending, but a fair and human one. After the ceremony, Henry looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "Thank you, Dad, for teaching me what not to do." And somehow he felt that the Henry from the past, the one who once feared love, had finally found peace too. That night, back at home, Clara drew another picture. 3 figures holding hands, a bigger sun shining above, and next to it, an envelope with wings. In the corner, she wrote with her crooked little letters, "Love arrives when we forgive." Henry hung the drawing on the wall. "I think the picture's complete now," he said, with the smile of someone who finally learned how to live. Mariana hugged him and replied, "Then let's leave it there, to remind us that love always finds its way back." One by one, the lights in the house went out. But the glow in their eyes, that quiet light of people who had finally found what they were searching for, stayed bright. Sometimes love doesn't arrive when we want it to. It gets lost in time, hides behind pride, or stays silent because fear speaks louder. But true love never disappears. It waits. It waits for the right moment to return. And when it does, it comes back changed, calmer, wiser, stronger. Henry and Mariana learned that the hard way. They were separated by lies, reunited by chance, and bound again by a little girl who never knew the past but carried the future in her eyes. Their forgiveness didn't erase what hurt. It turned the pain into something beautiful. And maybe that's what love truly is, choosing to stay even after everything. Now tell me, if you were in their place, would you have the courage to forgive? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more people can believe that love, when it's real, always finds its way back.